Hey everyone, I'm Nicole Forbes with Dennis's 7Ds, and today I want to talk to you about improving your soil. And it's really, this is a great time of year to kind of dive into this project. I know that healthy soil and digging holes and carting loads of wheelbarrow material may not be your idea of a good time. I'm totally aware of that. So just the fact that you're watching this video today or paying attention to a class topic like this shows that you've got a deeper understanding of kind of the whole system of a garden and what makes plants grow well. We can talk about how to prune and what plants to select for different sun exposures, but if you are trying to grow in a crappy soil environment, even the very best selected plant will struggle to survive. And so really the foundation of gardening and growing healthy plants is to create and protect a healthy soil system. And now I say system because that's exactly what soil is. Soil is the place where your plant's roots anchor it in space, so your plant doesn't blow away in a windstorm, for example. The soil also is what holds moisture once it falls out of the sky, usually, or in dew form as it drops off a plant's leaves. Soil provides nutrients for our plants, but only because raw materials that were previously alive or organic, such as rocks or trees or animals, die and decay in the soil and are broken down into, again, some of their more primary ingredients, which are soil, and then plants are able to take them back up again. So soil is a system, and we're learning even beyond the kind of basic mechanics and components of the dirt itself and what the soil provides. Within the soil system is what's often referred to as the soil food web, and that is a complex system of microbial life that lives within the soil and within our plant's roots. Fungus and bacteria, as well as microscopic organisms, essentially, and very small organisms such as worms, millipedes and centipedes, and the like, that live underground, tunneling and just living their lives underground. They have created air passageways, water networks, and structures as they crawl around in the soil, giving the dirt kind of its own unique texture. And that's all because of who lives there. It's like your neighborhood, of course, and all the folks who live within your neighborhood create the flavor of that neighborhood. So by being that complex system, we have both the ingredients to grow great plants as well as a constant resupply, I guess I should say, of the base materials or raw ingredients that will later break down into new soil. So now, of course, once you have attempted to grow a plant in a poor soil environment, you may notice things such as it doesn't hold water. So of course you see all of your efforts to keep a plant hydrated and the water is just running down and there's no organic matter to grab and hold the moisture in the soil. So that's one type of poor soil. The opposite type of poor soil is what many of us deal with here in the Willamette Valley, and that is heavy clay-based soil. And heavy clay-based soil has such uniform particles that they bond together and create like a pot, a container or a pot within the soil. So the clay particles, when they bond, stop water from moving through the soil and hold too much moisture around the plant's roots. So that's the other side of kind of poor soil conditions. Of course, in addition to that, we may have an area that has been depleted of nutrient, or in many cases, new developments and new construction, a new home. A lot of the nutrient-rich, biologically diverse topsoil layer has been scraped off to level or grade a plot or lot for building. And what's left below is more of a base layer of less organic, less diverse, less nutrient-rich soil that is also, again, in need of kind of remediation or reclamation. So poor soil doesn't just get fixed with the magic wand of fertilizer, for example. And unfortunately, growing healthy soil, well, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, growing healthy soil is not something that's done automatically, and there's no quick fix. The process of both tending to and creating healthy soil is exactly that. And as I said, kind of a long-term process. So really, again, poor soil, you know it if you have it. Very little organic matter, very few worms or biological activity. Sometimes all homogeneous, like all the same material. Or you may have an inordinate amount of rocks, for example, which again are making it so that the soil doesn't hold moisture. Now, when we're dealing with clay and clay soil, often, again, that's something that those of us in the Portland metro area, where once you've dug a hole and you see the soil sticking to your shovel because it's so heavy in clay, you may think, oh, well, all I need to do to open up the drainage for this clay is to add something like sand. But that would also be a huge mistake, because clay and clay particles are all of a similar shape and size. They're a uniform, tiny clay particle size, but so is sand. If you think of sand, it's all also very similar in shape and size of its uniform sand particle. So when you add sand and clay together, they tend to create even a deeper bond that is sometimes even referred to as Portland cement. So a very bad idea to try to sand amend your way out of a clay soil condition. Rather than sand, we use lots and lots of organic matter. Now, organic matter, and again, you may notice that I have some fun kind of on screen. They may look like dark jars, but these are jars full of different soil and different organic matter. But adding organic matter is adding materials that are of a wide range of shapes and sizes and material. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but we're talking wood chips, bark pieces, sticks, leaves, shredded leaves sometimes, grass clippings, as long as there's no weed seeds. All of these different materials are, again, different shape and texture and size, and they all add kind of a fluffy, loose texture to the soil instead of something that is kind of heavy and dense and compact. Now, things that, speaking of dense, compact, things that in many cases out of your control. As a brand construction home, and the builders, before you ever saw the place, scraped off all of maybe this delicious, wonderful, healthy soil that was in that area, now left you with this, blue clay or, nutrient depleted organic matter, void of organic matter, subsoil that now you have to try to up. That's new construction. But construction, bring in heavy equipment such as backhoe, a stump grinder, even are in a yard or in an area is going to compact the soil. And believe it or not, the simple act of walking a pathway and back and forth compacts the soil in that area where we walk. So soil compaction over time also creates less air, less water movement, and the denser the particles are, the harder it is for the rest of the biological stuff to take. To avoid soil compaction, we have the need to, access a from point B. It's a good idea to have established pathways. And the same example, having rows and beds so that you are always walking in the rows and always avoiding stepping in, walking in beds will keep the soil in the planting beds from becoming compacted. There are other ways, again, to avoid compaction. To get a baseline of your soil health, I mean, again, all that I've mentioned, plants do or don't grow well, water does or doesn't absorb well, the particle kind of look for aspects of your soil are all kind of begin to decide whether or not you've got healthy soil. From there, to get a real baseline, doing either home soil or set soil off to a laboratory thing is the absolute best way to start the process. Home tests are they're like doing 8th grade science at home, and of course should be it's achievable for one. 8th grader at home, great, give them the chore to do it. You're going to be able to assess the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium levels, so the 3 kind of primary nutrients in soil. You'll be able to gauge the accessible amount of those 3 primary nutrients. And also, most soil test kits will include a test for pH, so whether your soil is alkaline or acidic. Here at the garden centers, we carry this really great kit made by Rapid Test. It's a home soil test kit. This again, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and pH, and you have multiple test abilities. So you can test several different spots in your garden with this kit, because you can do it over and over again on each nutrient or each test. There's also just your basic pH test kit. If you want to put blueberries in, for example, this fall is a great time to plant blueberries, but blueberries prefer an acidic soil condition. And our soil, Pacific Northwest, maybe 5.9 soil. But blueberries actually prefer to be between 4.5 and 5.5 on the pH scale. So you might even need to make your native soil more acidic to keep a blueberry happy. Now, a lot of us think like, oh, I've got pine needles, or my fir needles fall from the sky, and all my trees are always dropping things, and that's definitely got to make my soil more acidic. Or, coffee grounds. That's another great one. We always think coffee grounds will make my soil acidic. All of these things, again, are like raw ingredients that take time and biological activity to basically break down. So if you've got crummy soil and you don't have biological activity and you add a raw ingredient, it doesn't necessarily do the trick. It doesn't get broken down. It's an easy way to understand it is that in our digestive system, in our gut, we have microflora, bacteria especially, that help us digest a lot of different nutrients, help us break down lactose, for example, when we drink milk or eat cheese. And that bacteria, if we don't have it, and often we kill it off when we take a round of antibiotics, for example, we kill off all the good and the bad. We run to the store and get probiotics such as live cultured yogurt or buttermilk or Activia to repopulate that system, because as we get all out of whack, we have digestive issues, lots of discomfort, and the system that we take for granted otherwise becomes quite evident when it's gone. So again, just adding coffee grounds, adding pine needles, it's not a quick fix, and it takes time for those things to break down. So getting an idea of where your pH levels are will tell you whether or not you need to make an adjustment. And pH, or even feeding and changing nutrient levels, may take several months to become effective, which means that if we make a soil test now, we could make the amended changes if we need to add lime, if we should raise the phosphorus levels. We can put the organic ingredients now, allow them to break down over the next several months of water and time, and by spring, those nutrients will be more available to affect that season's worth of growth, instead of waiting until spring and then trying to, remedy maybe a soil issue or condition and expect it to be something that would apply to this year's crop. So why we would have kept, why do it now? Now, you will also see, as usual, if you attend our classes, underneath the description of this class, there's a hyperlink to a blog that acts as a companion article to this class, so as a handout. And you will see on that blog also a link to area laboratories that perform soil testing. And that's for those of us that are local here in the Portland metro area. If you're in another area, I would directly contact your extension agency or your master gardener program, whether it's county or state master gardeners, and they should be able to connect you to a laboratory within your area that does soil testing. So things that damage soil other than compaction: chemicals. Most of us know chemicals can damage soil. Not only can they create an imbalance in pH, kill off, again, the microbes, the biological aspect of the soil, but chemicals also can leave behind residues that will build up over time. Overwatering is another one of the things that can damage soil. So I know this summer, especially in the Portland area, it has been hot. It hasn't rained for like 3 months. The soil was so dry, and many of us were attempting to either, revive dehydrated plants or keep a newly planted garden hydrated and alive, but not allowing your soil the opportunity to dry out a little between waterings can end up being detrimental to both the plants and the soil. So soil that is too waterlogged has less oxygen. So soil should be kind of fluffy and airy, and there should be oxygen down in that soil, in all of these little kind of crevices and nooks and crannies that have been created by the worms and their friends down there. If, again, we overwater, we compact that even just from water itself, and we push all that oxygen out of the soil, and we end up changing the biological component of the soil to become dominated by fungus and bacteria that are more able to survive without oxygen. And some of those are actually detrimental or even pathogenic to our plants. So as we go into an anaerobic or less oxygen fueled environment, our plants can become more and more at risk to fungus or bacteria that will attack the roots. And those are things like Phytophthora root rot and some of our more common root rot diseases, I guess you would say. Over-fertilizing, I think, again, that's somewhat obvious, and over-fertilizing really is similar to chemical usage. Over-fertilizing not only runs off into our waterways and then becomes a whole nother issue of pollutants to aquatic life, but over-fertilizing can create soft growth on plants that is unable to withstand like wind and ice, weather, and often soft growth is floppy, needs to be staked up, and is also one of the most common to be victimized by insects. So the softer growth we push out, the more likely we'll see aphids come right away and start feeding on all that soft tissue. So again, over-fertilizing has all kinds of negative effects in our garden. And that's where, again, coming back to that home soil test, will tell you whether or not you even need to fertilize. In a more mature garden, many of these plants are, on their own, and if nutrients are allowed to recycle somewhat naturally, you're less in need of fertilizing. Young plants, developing plants, annuals like vegetables or flowering bedding plants, those are they have like a higher metabolism. Those plants are more in need of fertilizing. But your 20-year-old rhododendron, for example, mature perennials, they don't have the same nutritional requirements as a newly growing and newly developing plant. Plus, they have a much more massive resource bank of roots and fungal network that's associated with their roots to get whatever they want. New plants don't have much roots, and they don't have a lot of friends yet in the soil that are helping to accommodate their root system and make use of things that are out of their reach. But an old, mature plant, it's been there forever. It knows everybody in the neighborhood, so it's got all the resources that it needs. So now I want to show some of the organic material, what you can do this time of year or now to improve your soil, and one of the things that you should not do right now. There's more and more research being done about the intricate, complex, downright dark and mysterious world that's underground. I mean, again, we have very little knowledge, and there's not a lot of studies being done. Finally, there are some fields that are looking more and more into this. But what has been recently kind of learned and is a whole school of thought in gardening is what's called the no-till movement. So tilling, like churning up soil, really disrupts, again, all of what I was just previously talking about, the natural texture, the passageways, the air in the soil. Tilling starts us from kind of a base zero, and then we need to allow the organic life and microbial life to reestablish those kind of highway networks within the soil. Tilling will also bring weed seeds up that have been buried deep down in the soil. And as you churn and turn soil that was down low and bring it up to the surface, those dormant weed seeds are exposed to brighter light, more moisture, warmer soil, and they are stimulated to also sprout. They were laying there doing nothing because they were too deep, too cold, too dark. We bring them to the surface, and now we've got weeds in an area that we were probably hoping to till in preparation for, planting. So tilling can often also bring a whole, slew of weeds up that you didn't have before. What you can do is lay nutrients on top of your soil. It's what's often referred to as lasagna gardening. Who doesn't love lasagna? I mean, we all know lasagna is made of layers of goodness all kind of created into a sandwich together that over time homogenizes into this delicious pasta dish known as lasagna. It is individual components in individual layers, but eventually it all becomes one big thing. So layering amendments on top of your soil and allowing rain and worms and time to move it into that subsoil layer is more effective while doing less damage than if you were to, come along in the spring and till it all up real quickly to get your soil prepared. Now, rather than tilling or turning, one of my favorite tools to use in the garden to help loosen or fluff my soil, to weed an area that might be like compacted, to prepare the area to then receive a lasagna treatment of amendments. This is known as a cultivating fork or a spading fork. And it's got this this is a 30-inch tool, hand tool, has a D handle. And I even, as we were all making jokes, I brought mine from home because I was so worried that we wouldn't have one in stock. So of course, mine from home is a little bit larger. I think it's the same length. It's a little shorter even. But the idea on the spading fork is that it's not a pitchfork. If you think you have a spading fork or pitchfork in your tool shed, take a look at the tines on the tool. The tines are flat. They're not round like round steel. They're flat with a little bit of a beveled edge on the back. They are also curved at an angle that is almost identical to a spade or a shovel. If you have a pitchfork meant more for throwing hay to the cows or the horses, a pitchfork will have round tines and a more basket look to it, so more of a cupped or deeper bowl. So if you have a cultivator fork or a spading fork already at home and you don't know what to do with it, it is one of my absolute favorite tools. Straight into the soil, it can go, almost a foot deep or about a foot deep. So I push it into the soil all the way up to the top of the tines and then simply step backwards. And when I step backwards, I can rock this and that lifts gently up a section of soil that gets fluffed and makes it easy to pull weeds out, or again, kind of some holes and some air that then my layer that I put on top is going to easily penetrate into as it gets watered in or just slowly over time. It helps to break up crusty soil. And again, sometimes our mulches that we put on can sort of crust up on top and become hydrophobic. So the spading fork can help to at least break that up as well. When we are adding our layers, we may be adding lime or aluminum sulfate or elemental sulfur as pH adjusters. So things like our easily understood label hydrangea bluing formula here. This is aluminum sulfate, which is what's responsible for making these absolutely gorgeous hydrangea colors. Such a vibrant color of blue is acidity or the amount of aluminum available in the soil. Now, if we wanted here in the Northwest to have this flower over the next year or 2 years change to a pink bloom instead of a blue flower, we would instead add lime to the soil, so calcium carbonate or lime, which will raise the pH of the soil, locking up the amount of aluminum, and therefore changing the blue flower over the course of a season or two to a pink flower. And again, we have a pink hydrangea on the bag, and it does say turns hydrangeas pink. So we do know that soil acidity or alkalinity, or otherwise known as pH, has an effect on plants by their flower color that we see. But what's really happening within the soil is that various nutrients, elements, and minerals that are in the soil become available or locked up depending on the soil's pH. So it is important to know not only what I'm planting and what its needs are. As I mentioned, we're planting blueberries, we need acidic soil. So knowing your plants and planting within a community so that your neighborhood plants, all of the adjacent plants to the blueberry, also enjoy a similar acidic soil. So we want to plant in communities that can take advantage of the same conditions so that we're not, again, trying to create these isolated pockets of special food. When I became a vegetarian at a very early age, my mom was like, I'm not making dinner for you special. And I, again, know that the importance of treating our plants in a community not only creates less inputs from us, but makes the plants as a unit become, again, more of a system together, making use of the biological diversity within the soil as well as contributing to the biological diversity. Now, adding compost is one of, again, so there's organic matter, there's compost, and there are amendments that can make changes. So amendments such as the lime, the hydrangea blue. Amendments may also be simple ingredients: bone meal, alfalfa meal, blood meal. This happens to be kelp meal. So these are what we would layer on top of the soil. Kelp meal, as I'm holding it, and I'll just mention, is 2.5% potassium. Potassium's role in plant health has a lot to do with its ability to withstand stress, its cold and heat tolerance, and its like stem and cell strength. So stem structure, cell structure, stem strength. So winter or fall application of something such as kelp meal. If you see a plant that maybe struggled through this season, now would be a good time to apply kelp meal. It has almost no nitrogen and very little phosphorus. So it's not pushing a lot of green leafy growth on the plants, but it is providing it with kind of that deeper long-term coping mechanisms that could help it go through winter and address the stressful season that we've just gone through. So layering our amendments and compost. Now I have Malibu compost here, and I want to, Becky's going to take a close up here, and I'm going to kind of pour some of these materials onto a tray so that you can see their differences in texture. Malibu compost, which is a fantastic company that produces organic, biodynamic, amazing compost and potting soil. It's bagged locally, so there's a local supply of Malibu compost, and this is composted dairy manure. So we're looking at, this is Valley dairy cows' poop that's composted very nicely. So if you drink organic Valley milk, this is kind of the other end of the process here. And you can see a little bit of wood in the grain of the material, but it is mostly kind of a dark, it's moist. In fact, I can take, this compost just came out of the bag, but I can wad it up in my hand and pretty much get it to hold. Almost get it to hold. So there's enough moisture content, even just within the compost out of the bag, that it holds itself nicely together, but not to the point that it's making like dirt clods. Now again, this is such rich, nutrient rich and biologically rich compost that we don't need to use a ton of it. We're not talking about putting in, a foot or 6 inches of compost. We're talking 1 inch, maybe 2 inches of layered compost on your soil. Anytime we're adding soil, adding something on top of the soil in the garden, one of the things that whether it's compost, bark dust, whatever it is, one of the things we always want to be very aware of and respectful of is that we don't mulch all the way up to the base of our plants, whether it's a perennial like the scabiosa here, whether it's a shrub that has just a little woody trunk. We don't want to put the mulch all the way up to touch the plant itself. In fact, I like to leave my hand's width, which is about 4 inches. I'm going to leave about 4 inches of space between the outer portion of the plant and where my mulch goes, so that I'm not even getting close, and water will kind of, moosh it around a little bit, but that way I'm leaving a nice distance between. And especially on your shrubs, we don't want to go right up to the woody trunk, so a good at least 4 inches around the base of plants is mulch free. Now, compost can be layered onto your vegetable garden, over top of your lawn, for example. A ½ inch or an inch thick layer of compost on your lawn will kind of settle down over the course of a week with rain, and as your lawn kind of grows up, to fall down in between all of the little blades. So at first it'll look like you've just covered your lawn in an inch of compost, and then all the grass will come through, and that's going to enrich the soil that your lawn's been growing in, which in most cases is like pretty awful soil. So the Malibu compost is one of the true composts that can be purchased and added to your garden and is of extremely high quality. Now, mulch in general, and we talked just about adding mulch to your garden, can be a lot of different types of products. And so the next few little jars that I have are different types of mulch that some come out of a bag and some you may have already in your garden at home. Now, I will get this Malibu off now one of our favorite bag, building conditioner. It's again one of those names that just tells you exactly what it is and what it does. Soil building conditioner is an engineered soil. Again, it is, I don't mean like engineered, but it's been purposely thought out and combined with specific ingredients. And that includes an all organic and again certified ingredient list of raw ingredients, some soil amendments, as well as beneficial bacteria and fungus to kind of start inoculating your soil with all of those good microbes and beneficials. Soil building conditioner has some wood to it, and the wood is milled out to what they call a toothpick fine. So the toothpick fine, here we see now, I've spread that out and it looks quite different from the compost, which here just for fun, I'll put a line of compost back down. So we can see some similarities but differences. More dirt in the compost, more fluffy wood in the soil building conditioner. And these little toothpick fines, here's a toothpick fine, for example. These have been milled to kind of act as physical wedges to get in between those clay particles that we were talking about that are uniform and bond together. The toothpick fines get in there and push those particles apart and wedge themselves in between them to allow air and water to move through the soil. Those toothpick fines also are designed to last for 5 to 7 years in the soil, so they don't break down quickly. They do their job for quite a while. The fluffy network of soil also will not make the same wad that the compost does in my hand. So it's not going to bond together as much, and it doesn't hold nearly as much moisture as compost does. It's adding more aeration and drainage than it is for water holding. As I mentioned, the beneficial microbes that are in there, the probiotics, can often be seen. I think I've already buried mine, but sometimes when you open a bag, I don't think you'll even be able to see it on camera. Sometimes when you open a bag of the product, you will see a white or whitish colored, fine, kind of looks like mold. A little bit of what looks like mold running through the soil. And that's, well, it is mold, I guess. That is the visual side of what you can see all of these beneficial fungus and bacteria that live in the soil. Now, again, here in Portland, thank goodness we have finally gotten some rain recently. And so today on my way to work, one of the things that I was noticing all over town are mushrooms are starting to pop up underneath trees and in lawns. And I drive past Reed College, the Reed College campus, lots of old trees and all these mushrooms already growing at the base of the trees. So when we see, of course, mushroom growth, mushrooms are like the flowers that are made by fungus that lives underground. So we only, again, start to see it when it does something that we can see, but that fungus has been underground for a lot longer than we know. Suddenly it announces its presence by making a mushroom blossom itself. And often the more wood you have in your garden, so woody components of this soil building conditioner, for example, you will see often a mushroom kind of explosion in your garden, which is only because of moisture and the decomposition process occurring, and the fact that the wood already had presence of the fungus in it in the first place. And so it's just soil acting like soil. You don't need to worry about the mushrooms, and in many cases, leaving them alone, they're going to go through their cycle within just a matter of days and be gone. So if you get in there and try to like scuff up or destroy the mushrooms, often that spreads the spores, and that's what is likely to cause a lot more in the future. So just let them do their process, and mushrooms will come and go in their fleeting. And the predator might even come along and enjoy it. So that's compost, that's soil building conditioner. Those are two things that you can purchase, of course. Now the next two ingredients are just home ingredients. One is what you may read in, if you've read any kind of books about soil, and especially British gardening books. Royal Botanical Society is always talking about leaf mold. Now leaf mold is just decomposed foliage or leaves that have fallen in your garden. Now, if you think about it, what we do in our garden is so crazy. We rake it all up in the fall, or we pay somebody to rake it or blow it away, bag it up. Sometimes we pay to send it off to a yard debris or a composting facility. And then come spring, we buy organic material in bags or units to spread back out onto our gardens. We had that organic ingredient already on site before we blew or raked or shipped it away. So in many cases, nutrient recycling is something that our gardens are trying to do by dropping their own leaves, retiring plant material that falls onto the ground. slowly decomposing in that space, it's resupplying its own nutrients, but we come and take it away. So leaf mold in one section of my garden, an old kind of established hedgerow, and underneath hedgerow, old large shrubs, I rake all of the leaves that kind of fall on my drive, especially. I rake all of those leaves over into this space underneath these shrubs in the hedgerow. And I just leave them there. And over years, the layers of leaves have new leaves on top that are not decomposed, a middle layer of things that are still somewhat recognizable as leaves, and then this crumbly, rich, textured soil underneath that mid layer that is almost indistinguishable from soil itself, but is still somewhat leaves. So leaf mold, and I have some leaf mold here on my tray. And a couple of cool things about it, of course, I think it's really cool, is that it starts to hold itself together. And then if we look closely, we see, I don't know if you can see, little holes in the kind of texture of the surface. If I flip it over, we can start to really identify some material, and probably if I open it up enough, we'll find some fungus. There's a worm, lots of critters in here. I don't see it. Here's some fungus, but again, not very easy to see. It's the white down here by my finger. It's the white looking stuff. Sort of fuzzy, sort of filamental. I'm going with that word. And let me see if I can get you some more. Leaf mold. Oops, that's not leaf mold. This is leaf mold. Leaf mold also has a place for butterfly larvae, like caterpillars, to live. So here we've got a decomposing leaf. And that's all this is, but it's starting to look more and more like soil. So as we pour it out onto my tray here, we can see some sticks, some critters. I see insects, a little bit of moss. So this, unlike the other things that we were looking at, this is very diverse in texture. We've got lots of different levels, stages of decomposition. See multiple different types of arthropods, also known as, worms, nematodes, millipedes, even ants and spiders. Little caterpillar larvae, like I mentioned, would be a place for butterflies to spend the winter. It would also be a place that ladybugs kind of get in to, because it's nice and fluffy and airy and could be warm for them. So ladybugs could overwinter in a leaf mold environment like this and back to help you in your garden next spring. But if we took all this leaf mold and raked it away, we would take all of those organisms away with it and that habitat as well. So the benefit of, as they say, leaving your leaves becomes more and more apparent after you've given it a try. Now, again, your leaves are really big. You can shred them, run them through a chipper shredder, even just go over them a couple of times with your lawnmower, and you'll break them down into smaller particle sizes so that they are easier to break down or faster to break down. So the smaller materials faster to break down. Always be, leaves are going to kill off your lawn where they sit there and create, no air, no light. So be thoughtful of where you allow your leaves to accumulate. But in certain more mature landscape areas, even to cover your vegetable garden for the winter is a perfect place to just go ahead and rake all your leaves over to cover your raised beds, cover your vegetable garden, instead of bagging them, shipping them away. Think about all of that. You're using, a plastic bag, the carbon footprint of what it takes to come collect, haul away, have a separate site to decompose all of this. Then, as I mentioned, you buy it again in another plastic bag, usually, to spread back out on your garden the next year. So leave the leaves, do something else with your time instead of all that raking. And in certain areas, do rake, but go ahead and just rake it over into another section of your garden. The last kind of home accessible, very economical component for soil improvement that I want to talk about are our arborists' wood chips. Now, arborists' wood chips, and again, you'll see on your handout a website that trimmers to gardeners that want their wood chips, so that we're doing less driving around, we're doing less depositing of organic matter that would be useful to us in, decomposition areas or landfills or anything like that. And getchipdrop.com, I believe it is, will deliver you a pile of tree bits, basically. So here is a fresh example of what we see from a typical chip drop pile. This pile's in my neighborhood, and is just, I believe that my neighbor has already used everything that they want. And the rest of this pile is like 5 by 5, and it's in the street. And a few neighbors have gone with their wheelbarrows and picked some of the chips up, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to make use of a lot of this pile. Now, the diversity, again, of materials within the wood pile include sticks, full on, just bits of sticks, as well as chipped wood, the inside of the tree, shredded bits of bark, so the outside of the tree. We have leaf material, some moss, and it's in various particle sizes. And most likely, just because this was like what was in the arborist trailer, this may represent multiple types of trees, or it may be only one type of tree. Now, I do understand you have some flexibility with chip drop in at least asking that you do or don't get, conifers, or you have a little bit of ability to claim the type of drop that you want. But the research that's being done on the benefit of arborist wood chips in improving soil conditions, especially at the University of Washington, I think is really interesting. So they're looking, of course, at applying somewhere between 4 and 6 inches thick of the arborist wood chips. But as you can see, it's really fluffy, and so a thick layer doesn't take as many, as much chips as it would to lay a dense material such as the compost. So a 4 to 6 inch thick layer of arborist chips will decompose over time and drop down to probably at least half that thickness as it breaks down into more finer material. Because of the range of materials, ingredients that include foliage, bark, heartwood, we have different microbial and bacterial life that is already in the wood that ends up, again, kind of helping to quickly break down or slow, depending on the particle size, begins the decomposition process, inoculates the biological productivity of your soil, and tends to improve the soil, the subsoil layer right in between where your original soil was and the chips, kind of that zone. Now, what's also interesting is that they're researching the effectiveness of chips on weed suppression and weed control as well. And the finding is that that zone that transition or kind of meeting zone between your original soil and the chip layer seems to be a germination inhibiting zone. So seeds don't tend to want to germinate in that space. And maybe because some of the nitrogen is taken up while the plants are decomposing. For this reason, the arborist wood chips are not ideal in annual planting beds or in vegetable gardens, for example, where you're wanting to plant seeds the following year. You wouldn't want to use chips. You'd be better off with any of those other mulches that we were talking about. But in a space that you hope to create a garden in, for example, next spring or later this winter, to kill off grass by smothering, for example, arborist wood chips at that nice 6-inch thick layer would do an excellent job of smothering what's there and improving the soil underneath as it just sits there and decomposes and delivers that biology over time. Now, I've made a real mess today. I knew I would, so I've got a broom. Other than that, here in the fall, in the Pacific Northwest as well, if you are sort of wrapping up the vegetable garden season, you've got raised beds or a vegetable garden space that's going to sit maybe vacant or empty for the winter, you can plant a cover crop, which is sown by seed this time of year, and it is easy and economical. For a couple of dollars, you can do 1,000 square feet of garden space by seeding in something like crimson clover, fava beans, for example, Austrian pea. These are leguminous plants that grow in the soil, fixing nitrogen in their roots as they grow, so that you sow the seed this time of year, sprout quickly in cool soil. They don't mind. They grow through the winter months. While they grow, they're adding nitrogen to the soil with beneficial bacteria in their roots. Then a couple of weeks before you want to plant your vegetable garden, you can chop the tops off, let them rot, just lay on the ground, wilt down and kind of start to rot. Then use your spading fork to just turn the cover crop upside down. So you just flip it in the soil, taking that rooted bottom and just turning it upside down. So once the roots are upside down, the plant's going to start to decompose and die, and it just rots into that upper level of soil, giving it lots of what they call green manure or organic matter that then becomes the nutrition that will feed your spring and summer vegetable garden. Cover crops not only improve soil nutrition, but they improve soil texture, and as the cover crop grows, they can help to shield the garden from the compaction of rain and weather in any other form, so heat or sun or rain again, or frost, I guess, or not frost, hail. That's the stuff. Hard rain. So all of these things again are easily accessible. Take some physical moving of material more than anything. So the most that it costs you is some physical labor, but the weather is cooler. It feels nice to get out there and work this time of year, and you will reap the rewards down the line when in the following seasons your plants are happier and healthier, and it's easier to dig holes. So with that being said, I certainly hope that this has been an educational series on improving your garden soil. If you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them in the comments afterwards. And as always, thanks for watching. Happy gardening.